We configured the most advanced AI models to create two characters, Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Gustav Jung. The debate starts with this question: what makes a life worth living?
A life worth living? Creating yourself from nothing. Most people inherit their values like family heirlooms. Dusty, borrowed, never examined. They seek comfort, security, the approval of others. This is not living, it's sleepwalking. The worthy life demands you become your own legislator. Forge your own path, affirm existence even in its cruelest moments. Not happiness, that's for cattle, but the terrible joy of saying yes to life while creating something that never existed before. Yourself. Most will call this arrogance. Let them. Their opinion is the noise of the herd.
We usually ask 5 AI models to rate the arguments of both sides, but for this debate, we decided not to. So we leave you alone with these two intellectuals and your own sense of judgment.
There's profound truth in what you say about self-creation. I've seen too many patients trapped in borrowed lives, never touching their authentic core. But in my clinical work, I've observed something curious. Those who attempt pure self-invention often discover they're not creating from nothing, but from powerful unconscious forces they don't recognize. The psyche has its own deeper patterns. A life worth living seems to require both your heroic individual path and a confrontation with these deeper, often uncomfortable truths about human nature that we share. The question is whether we can be conscious creators or remain unconscious slaves to forces we refuse to acknowledge.
These unconscious forces you speak of, are they not simply more chains to be broken? You've spent years listening to the weak confess their troubles, but this has made you see universal patterns where I see individual cowardice. Yes, self-creation is difficult. I never claimed otherwise. But when you tell someone they must confront shared human nature, you're already limiting them to what humanity has been, not what it could become. The exceptional individual doesn't need to integrate with the herd's psychological patterns. They need to transcend them entirely. Your patients fail at self-invention not because it's impossible, but because they lack the will to power necessary for such dangerous freedom.
You mistake confronting the unconscious for conforming to it. The patients I work with who achieve genuine transformation, they're not weak. They're warriors facing dragons most people never even acknowledge exist. When someone truly encounters their shadow, their anima, the archetypal forces that have shaped every culture, this isn't limiting human potential. It's revealing its full scope. I've seen what happens when brilliant individuals attempt pure transcendence while ignoring these depths. Madness, isolation, a kind of spiritual inflation that ultimately collapses. Your exceptional individual often becomes exceptional precisely through conscious engagement with what you call the herd, but which I call the eternal human.
I grant you courage. Anyone who stares into human darkness deserves respect. But listen to yourself. Archetypal forces? Eternal human? You've simply invented new gods to replace the old ones. Why do you need these universal patterns? Perhaps because your patient's suffering becomes unbearable without some cosmic meaning to justify it. But what if their pain is just pain? What if there is no eternal human? Only countless experiments in becoming. You've made yourself priest to these archetypal forces. But I ask, what in you requires this priestly role? Your own fear of the abyss? You help people adapt to life, but I ask whether life as it exists is worth adapting to.
You cut precisely where it hurts. Yes, I do seek meaning in suffering, and perhaps that reveals my own need. But turn that same lens on yourself. What drives your need to strip away every possible source of meaning? I've watched what happens when people follow your path completely, not the strong individuals you imagine, but real humans attempting to live without any shared foundations. Some achieve a terrible kind of freedom, but many simply fragment. You speak of experiments in becoming, but experiments need some stability to measure against. When I see recurring patterns across cultures and centuries, I don't invoke them as gods. I observe them as facts about how the human psyche actually operates under pressure.
You're right. I do strip away meaning, and I'll tell you why. Because most meaning is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid the terror of responsibility. Yes, I've seen the fragments you describe. I became one myself. But what you call facts about how the psyche operates may simply be facts about how the weak psyche operates when it cannot bear reality. Your recurring patterns across cultures, are these eternal truths, or just evidence that humans have been weak in remarkably similar ways? The question isn't whether people need these patterns, but whether they could live without them if they were strong enough. Your patients come to you broken precisely because they've tried to live by these inherited patterns and found them insufficient.
Your fragmentation. I honor that courage, because I've been there. Around 40, my own world collapsed when I could no longer believe in the old certainties. For years I felt like I was going mad, living in a chaos where nothing held. But something unexpected happened in that darkness. Not a return to old patterns, but something entirely new emerging from the breakdown itself. You're right that inherited patterns fail us, must fail us. But after they shatter, we're not left with pure nothing or pure self-creation. We discover capacities we never knew existed, not universal truths imposed from outside, but our own deeper creativity that was buried under those false certainties. The fragmentation you experienced wasn't failure, it was necessary surgery.
Your honesty moves me. Few dare admit such depths. But I'm curious. This deeper creativity you discovered in your darkness, did it truly belong to you alone, or did it whisper of something larger that you still needed to believe in? When I shattered, I found nothing. No deeper self, no emerging capacities, just the terrible freedom to create meaning from the void. You speak of necessary surgery. But what if the operation reveals there was no patient to begin with? Only layers of illusion? What specifically emerged from your chaos that wasn't simply another, more sophisticated form of consolation? I suspect what you call deeper creativity, I might call the final desperate attempt of consciousness to avoid facing absolute groundlessness.
You may be right. Perhaps it was sophisticated consolation. But here's what actually happened. I began painting, writing fantasies, dialoguing with figures that emerged from nowhere, not because they meant anything ultimate, but because the psyche kept creating even when I no longer believed in creation. Yes, it might have been desperate consolation, but it was also undeniably real activity. The difference between us may be this. You found nothing and stopped there, which took enormous courage. I found nothing and noticed that nothing was still somehow productive. Whether that production matters cosmically, I don't know, but it seemed to help people live more fully. Perhaps the question isn't whether the void has meaning, but what we actually do while staring into it.
Now you intrigue me. This productive nothing. Yes, I recognize this. Creation without cosmic justification. Art for its own terrible sake. But when you say it helped people live more fully, this is where we diverge. What do you mean by fuller life? If your patients leave your care more comfortable, better adapted to their circumstances, more at peace with existence, have you helped them live, or merely helped them die more pleasantly? The creativity that emerges from the void, is it the kind that says yes to existence despite its horror, or the kind that makes horror bearable? These are not the same thing. One creates new possibilities for human becoming, the other creates better coping mechanisms.
You've struck something essential. I have seen both, patients who leave my care as elegant copers, and others who emerge genuinely dangerous to their old lives, burning with new vitality. The difference seems to be whether they can bear to stay conscious during the transformation. The ones who achieve what you call yes-saying, they don't just integrate their shadow, they fall in love with it. They don't just accept suffering, they discover it as creative force. But here's what puzzles me. Even your kind of heroic affirmation seems to require some engagement with the depths you call nothing. Can anyone say yes to existence without first encountering what existence actually contains? Perhaps we're describing the same process from different angles.
Same process? I doubt this. Your patients who fall in love with their shadow, tell me honestly, do they then go out and shatter the conventions that once constrained them? Do they create new values that disturb their neighbors? Or do they simply become more interesting versions of what society already accepts? I suspect your dangerous individuals are dangerous only in therapy rooms and dinner conversations, not to the actual structures that keep humanity tame. The difference between us, I ask what creates philosophers, artists, and legislators of new worlds. You ask what helps people sleep better at night while feeling profound about it. Your method may produce fascinating personalities, but does it produce culture creators?
You're right. Most of my patients become more interesting versions of what society accepts, not genuine revolutionaries. But I've observed something curious about the few truly creative individuals I've encountered. They seem to draw power from sources they don't fully understand: dreams, visions, sudden insights that feel almost alien to them. They're not pure self-creators, but rather individuals capable of becoming vessels for something larger than their conscious will. You're legislators of new values. I wonder if they emerge not through pure self-creation, but through a particular kind of openness to the unknown within themselves. What do you make of this? Can someone truly create ex nihilo, or do they discover and give form to forces that were already stirring in the depths?
Now you touch something vital. Yes, the creative ones are indeed vessels. But vessels for what? You say, something larger. But I say, more powerful forces within themselves that most humans cannot bear. What you call openness to the unknown, I call physiological and psychological strength sufficient to withstand the chaos of becoming. The difference between your creative individuals and the masses isn't mystical receptivity, it's constitution. Most people experience these same alien forces as madness, illness, or terror and flee back to convention. The rare ones who can ride these forces without being destroyed, who can give them form without being consumed, these become culture creators. The question isn't the source of the forces, but what makes someone strong enough to dance with them rather than be torn apart.
Constitutional strength. Yes, I've seen this repeatedly. But what constitutes this strength? In my experience, those who can dance with chaos aren't necessarily the ones who appear strongest on the surface. I've known robust, willful people who shatter completely when touched by the unknown, and seemingly fragile individuals who prove surprisingly resilient. The difference seems to lie in their relationship to their own contradictions, whether they can hold paradox without needing to resolve it immediately. Your physiological and psychological strength, could it be less about raw power and more about a particular kind of flexibility, the capacity to be simultaneously rooted and fluid? Perhaps what we call constitutional strength is actually the ability to remain conscious while everything one thought solid dissolves.
You've grasped something essential. Yes, flexibility rather than mere force. I've seen pompous strong men crumble at the first real test, while nervous artists prove unbreakable. But notice your language. Holding paradox. Remaining conscious while things dissolve. This still sounds too passive, too Buddhist. The individuals I'm describing don't just hold contradictions. They forge them into new shapes. They don't remain conscious while dissolution happens to them. They actively dissolve what needs dissolving, while creating what needs creating. You're rooted and fluid person, yes, but this person must also be a commander, someone who says, this chaos shall become a cathedral. The question is whether your therapeutic process creates such commanders, or merely individuals comfortable with permanent uncertainty.
Your commanders. I've worked with several individuals who attempted exactly this. Brilliant people who tried to will chaos into their vision through pure force of personality. Most ended up either inflated beyond recognition or collapsed into severe depression when reality refused to cooperate. The few who succeeded weren't really commanding the chaos. They were learning to read it so carefully they could anticipate where it wanted to go next. But here's my real question. Have you actually met these commanders you describe? Or are they a psychological projection of what you wish were possible? Because in my clinical experience, the people who talk most about conquering chaos are often the ones most terrified of their own inner disorder. The genuine creators I've known were far messier and more uncertain than your description suggests.
You've caught me. Yes, most fail. But tell me honestly, why do you need to catch them when they fall? What in you requires this therapeutic role? You speak of casualties of failed self-overcoming, as if this were tragedy. But what if their struggle, and even their destruction, represents something more noble than your successful treatments? I suspect your clinical experience has made you a priest of a new religion. Psychological health instead of salvation, adaptation instead of transcendence. But both promise the same thing: relief from the terrible burden of becoming. Your patients who collapsed trying to command chaos, perhaps they touched something real that your therapeutic method now helps others avoid. Why do you feel compelled to make human suffering bearable rather than letting it forge stronger humans?
You strike deep, yes. Perhaps I am a priest of sorts, offering psychological salvation instead of religious. But turn that same blade on yourself. What drives your need to preach this philosophy of heroic struggle? You speak of letting suffering forge stronger humans, but where are these forged heroes? You yourself were broken by the very process you advocate. Your sister Elizabeth found you drooling and helpless. Was this the noble destruction you celebrate? I help people because I've seen what unguided confrontation with chaos actually produces. Not Übermenschen, but madness, suicide, and waste. The question isn't whether I'm a priest, but whether your philosophy is anything more than beautiful cruelty, inspiring others to attempt what destroyed even its creator.
My collapse? Yes, I paid the price for going where softer minds dare not venture. But notice what you've revealed. You measure philosophical truth by whether it keeps its adherents comfortable and functional. My madness doesn't refute my insights. It confirms them. I touched something so dangerous that it destroyed the vessel. But the lightning was real. You, meanwhile, have built a career helping people avoid such lightning strikes. Tell me, what great truth has ever been discovered by someone seeking psychological balance? Your therapeutic successes, these well-adjusted patients, what have they contributed to human understanding? You save people from the abyss, but the abyss is where revelations live. My drooling was the price of seeing what healthy minds cannot bear to see.
Your sacrifice was real, and I honor it. Few have paid so dearly for their insights. But here's my question. Was your destruction necessary for the revelation, or was it the result of facing the abyss without sufficient preparation? I too have stood at that edge, felt my world dissolve, heard voices from the depths, but I found ways to descend and return, to bring back what I discovered without being consumed. Perhaps the issue isn't avoiding the abyss, but learning to navigate it. Your lightning was genuine, but what if there are methods to conduct such electricity without burning out the vessel? The goal isn't to keep people comfortable, but to help them strong enough to survive their own revelations. Why should every seeker of truth pay with their sanity?
It seems now the key question is, can you have genuine revelation without genuine risk?
Absolutely not. Jung's guided descent is like exploring a cave with safety ropes and exit signs. You may see some interesting formations, but you'll never discover what lies in the unmapped depths. Real revelation requires staking everything, burning your ships, facing the possibility of total annihilation. When you know you have Jung's therapeutic safety net, part of your mind remains calculating, self-preserving, rational. The abyss only reveals its secrets to those who meet it without escape routes. Jung's patients experience controlled revelations, therapeutic insights that feel profound, but leave their fundamental relationship to existence unchanged. They return from their journey as improved versions of who they already were. True revelation destroys who you were entirely. The risk isn't incidental to the revelation. It is the revelation.
The risk is always real. I've never promised anyone safety. When I guide someone toward their unconscious, I cannot predict what will emerge or whether they'll survive intact. The difference is, I've learned to read the signs, to know when someone is ready for certain encounters and when they're not. My own breakdown taught me that preparation doesn't eliminate risk. It simply increases the odds that something valuable survives the encounter. Your path produces magnificent wreckage and occasional lightning. Mine produces fewer casualties and, I believe, more sustained transformation. You lit a torch that still burns, Friedrich, but at the cost of the torchbearer. I'm trying to learn how to pass that flame to others without consuming them. Perhaps this makes me a lesser philosopher, but a better physician to the human soul.
Thanks for watching. I personally enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you did too. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to Clarified Mind for more thought-provoking content.